If you work for Johnson Concrete or Stalite, you'd probably call him Mr. Newsome. If you've known him a really long time, you'd probably call him Charlie. Or maybe you don't know his name, you just know him as the guy with the red beret. Or the guy with the breast cancer socks. To me, he's Charles. For as long as I can remember, there's always been Charles. Like many children, I grew up with lots of aunts and uncles, and it wasn't until much later in life that I realized that there wasn't a blood relationship with some of them. My grandfather died in 1982, a year after I was born, so Charles sort of assumed a patriarchal role in our family. Not only did he attend our Thanksgiving dinners, but he told us where to sit, and he made us go around the room and say what we were thankful for. Always the manager. I was probably a teenager, or at least a tween, before I realized that Charles wasn't family, but rather the general manager and executive vice president of the companies that my grandfather had started. Fast forward a decade or so, and I was living in Chicago, burned out from working at a global consulting company in Midyear, North Carolina. At Thanksgiving 2009, I told Charles I was thinking about quitting my job and moving back to North Carolina. I asked him if he thought there was a place for me at either Johnson or Stalite, and that my intention was to work for a couple years, study for the GMAT, and get my MBA before coming back to the businesses for good. He told me, do whatever you want, but I can promise you, you will learn more working for me through this recession than you will at any business school. I never made it back to business school, so I can't definitively say that he was right, but his batting average is pretty good and he's not often wrong. It's my pleasure to tell you a little bit about the man that I've become to know as a boss, a mentor, and a grandfather figure. So who is Charles Newsome? Above all else, Charles is a family man. Much of his family is here today. His lovely wife, Chris, their daughters, Helen and Josh, and his grandkids, Moses and Willoughby. Family is paramount, more important than anything else. Charles knows the names of our employees, the names of their wives, and oftentimes the names of their children. When I found out I was pregnant, I called my husband first and Charles second. He knew before my mom. He's been my biggest cheerleader as I've tried to manage motherhood and having a career. Charles is a hustler. He was not handed anything. He grew up in Greenville, North Carolina on a tobacco farm. His father died when he was a baby, so he grew up as the man of the house. He learned that he could make $100 annually through the 4-H program by training a cow to walk on a leash. So he started doing so every year from a young age. In high school, he drove the school bus, and he cooked in the cafeteria to earn income. He was 16 years old. During one of our many drives together, he once told me somewhat sheepishly that at 18 he bought a toilet for his family home. It was the first one they'd ever had. Yes, that's him riding a goat. Charles noticed that the nicest houses and the nicest cars in Greenville belonged to the graduates of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So he formed a plan. He applied and was accepted at UNC, but was not allowed to enroll until he took additional high school classes because his country high school did not offer geometry or foreign language. He was given two choices: attend Chapel Hill High or enroll at Campbell and transfer to UNC Chapel Hill. He chose the latter and graduated as a Tar Heel. Sorry, I meant Tar Heel. With the intention of becoming a lawyer. Charles quickly realized he did not want a career as a lawyer and took a job as a Giant cement salesman, a position in which he instantly excelled. Giant was interested in acquiring Stalite, and they sent in Charles to close the deal. My grandfather was not interested in selling, but he was intrigued with Charles. Charles was hired as 1968 as general manager of Stalite and its sister company, Tuflite. And then when my grandfather died in 1982, he became executive vice president of Johnson Concrete. Charles is a visionary. When you ask Charles what he's proud of, Stalite is high on his list. When Charles started, Stalite was using sintering machines, and its furthest customer was 125 miles away in Columbia, South Carolina. Today, Stalite operates 8 rotary kilns with patented technology, ships material all over the world, and is an industry leader in structural lightweight concrete. Sorry about that. YPG is representing real well up here. Likewise, he expanded Johnson Concrete from 2 small gray block plants to being a regional supplier in the Southeast with full lines of architectural masonry and SRW in 19 block cavities. Charles has a vision for our industry. His accolades are numerous. His office walls are lined with plaques of recognition. He will tell you, though, that our greatest industry achievement and opportunity is Chekhov. Charles was an early and ardent supporter of the Chekhov program. As NCMA chair, he challenged the industry to get 100 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives and then personally led a grassroots effort to get 267 co-sponsors. He's made numerous trips to Washington, D.C. to personally meet with senators and congressional reps and has flown extensively throughout the country to solicit industry support. Charles told me that 8 years passed from when you first met with North Carolina Senator Burr to when our bill was finally signed. So what's next for this man who is obviously not very good at sitting still? He plans to continue volunteering with the Chekhov. He's also starting a new business. He's recruited a talented board, and they had their first organizational meeting last week. He's also writing two books, a fiction novel, and a how-to guide for missionary operations. You see, Charles knows a thing or two about missionary work. He's been to Africa 30 times, 25 of those times to the Zambian village of Mwandi. I'm going to tell you the story of Mwandi, because to tell the story of Mwandi tells the story of Charles, a family man, a hustler, and a visionary. The story begins at Thyatira Presbyterian Church in rural North Carolina. The congregation is small and largely comprised of farmers, school teachers, and middle-class families. Charles is active in a Thyatira Sunday school class that committed to reading the entire Bible cover to cover out loud over the course of 2 years. Inspired by what they had read, the Sunday school class decided they want to visit some of the historically significant places in the Bible. One problem is they had no money. So Charles and his Sunday school class went to work. They cleaned bathrooms at Charlotte Motor Speedway, they parked cars at local events, and they cooked meals for cash any chance they could. Soon enough, they had raised enough money to send 15 people to Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. Charles and his peers enjoyed the trip, but they realized during the fundraising efforts that they really enjoyed having a project. The Medical Benevolence Foundation was raising money for Presbyterian hospitals abroad. Charles reached out to see where there was the greatest need. After a quick tour of Africa, the answer was clear: Mwandi, Zambia. The year was 1989, AIDS was an epidemic, and the village hospital was a concrete building with a thatched roof and no windows. Google Mwandi, and you'll find that over 100 churches have sent missionaries to Mwandi. But it was Charles and his Thyatira Sunday school class who were the first to adopt the village. Charles went to Mwandi to scout out the location. The Presbyterian missionary doctor told him that the village desperately needed electricity. A generator provided just 2 hours of electricity to the hospital each day, which meant doctors often treated patients and delivered babies by candlelight. There were high voltage transmission lines 2 miles from the hospital, but Zambia Power did not have the resources to connect them. Back home in North Carolina, Charles talked to the head electrician at Stalite, who connected him with the best electrical engineer in Salisbury, a gentleman named Winston. Charles recruited Winston for his project, and together they designed a substation, developed a budget, and convinced the Zambian government to let them proceed. It took 3 years and $350,000 of grassroots fundraising to build the substation and bring electricity to the village of Mwandi and its hospital. With electricity on the horizon, the Sunday school class decided that the hospital needed to be remodeled. Thyatira fundraised and sent 3 teams of 25 people each during the course of one summer to remodel old hospital buildings. Now that they had electricity and a remodeled hospital, they needed doctors. Charles knew that if he were going to attract top American volunteer doctors to Mwandi, he needed to have a decent place for them to stay. By this point, Thyatira's success in building a substation had generated national attention within the Presbyterian network. When Charles announced his intentions to build a guest house, a church in Grand Rapids donated a metal building frame. The Thyatira crew shipped the frame and returned to Mwandi to erect it, while also teaching locals to make concrete blocks for the foundation, one at a time, using a wooden mold. If you build it, they will come. Once the guest house was finished, once the guest house was finished, doctors started coming to Mwandi. One doctor from Salisbury, recruited by Charles, has done over 500 cataract surgeries. Armed with electricity and a guest house, a group from Columbia, South Carolina formed in 1992 to build a new hospital in Mwandi. Today, this group is called Medical Missions and has expanded to include medical campuses in other parts of Africa, the Amazon, and Costa Rica. Charles became chairman of the Mwandi Hospital Board and served for 10 years. During his tenure, he established scholarships for village medical students and approached the presidents of Davidson College and East Carolina University about sending pre-med students to Zambia. Davidson College now has a summer study abroad program in Mwandi, and a chancellor at ECU leads a team each year of medical students, physicians, and nurses on a 3-week medical mission trip to Mwandi. Over the years, the various missionaries have built a school, an orphan center, and most recently, a new church, which was finished and dedicated only a few years ago. Charles recruited a prominent architect from Eastern North Carolina to design the 5,300 square foot building, and several North Carolina general contractors to oversee construction on site. Together, they built a complicated octagon-shaped sanctuary using a block and tackle pulley and concrete mixed by hand. This book is one of Charles's most prized possessions. It was given to him from the chief with an inscription that says, "Presented to Charles Newsome for his relentless service to the people of Mwandi." A family man, a hustler, a visionary, my grandfather, and the most deserving inductee in the North Carolina Hall of Fame. Come get your award, boss man.
Darling, that was a lot. Wow. You know, I've formed some basic feelings about life. And I think we all have, you know, I want to have people that are around me a lot. You understand that I feel like we all have the same 24 hours. And I challenge you to think about how you spend yours. Because we actually use up our lives one moment at a time. And I encourage you on a personal level to accept responsibility for yourself. I personally believe that we're personally responsible for our own happiness and what we do with our lives. And when I look back over my life and the challenges that I was given, it's been a great ride, I tell you. And you know, I thank a lot of people, certainly my family, Chris and Heather and Josh and Wilby and Moses, and all of you. A lot of you are my friends, and we work together to move the industry forward. But when I look out at the future, the challenge is there. And I encourage you, you heard Darrell talk about what we're doing, but I challenge you to individually make a commitment to move the industry forward. Because I served for many years on a board called the Insteel Industries that started off in the block business. And their president was also chairman of NCMA 50 years exactly until 2013 when I became the chairman. And we both gave the same speech, and I didn't see his. It was amazing, the lack of movement in 50 years. And I challenge you, because if you don't have movement now, if you don't innovate and do the same things that Darrell was talking about, you'll eventually dry up and blow away. And I don't want to see that. You know, I've invested 50 years of my life in helping the industry grow and realize its full potential. And I'm convinced that if you personally commit, that it will. If you don't, if you wait for somebody else to do it, then it won't. We need to innovate, innovate, and innovate. You heard the other speakers talk about it. And we've done a good job in some areas and not so good in other areas. You know, years ago I had a Think Outside the Box meeting, and I think Bob Thomas and several masonry contractors attended. And I challenged them then. I said, if you look at other industries, they have really innovated. Everything from a cookie packaging to Gillette changing the way you shave. And what have we done? So I challenge you to get up and get out and do things, whether it's a different size block, a different weight block, a different way of fastening. You know, I'm delighted to see the run being made at mortarless block. That's been tried before. A lot of these things have been tried before, and for whatever reason have not been adopted. And I also encourage you to partner with the other parts of the industry, the masonry contractors, the architects, engineers, the structural engineers, because you can do so many different things with block. But you have to be able to define it and make it happen. And you know, there's been a lot of improvements in the way you produce block. Even though we just built a church one block at a time in a wooden mold. But it's a very humbling experience, and I won't ramble on because you've sat through several hours of this. But as I turn another chapter in my life, I feel like I'm not finished yet. And I'm thankful for the opportunities that you've given me to get to this point in my life. And I'm very humble, and thank you.